Okay, we'll call the meeting of the Policy Committee of the School District of Waukesha to order, December 15th, 2015. And have we been properly posted?
Yes, we have.
And I see no citizens, so we'll move on. We need a motion to approve our minutes from our November meeting.
Madam Chairman, I move to accept the meetings as minutes as presented.
Okay. Is there a second? No? Okay, I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye? Okay, I think, did you want to vote yes or no?
Aren't I supposed to abstain if I wasn't here?
You don't have to, but
Oh,
okay. 2 for and 1 abstention. We'll record it that way, okay, Lynn? Okay, so we'll move on to our new policy, that procurement card program. And Joe, you want to take us back through that?
Yeah, so last month, if you remember, we kind of had a little bit of a different
Yeah.
meeting schedule. So after the regular board meeting, or just the day before the regular board meeting, we met and the P card policy was presented.
Yep.
It was not then presented at the regular board that night, or the following night, but it went in front of F and F last week, Monday. And there was some debate on the program itself. But then the policy went there, and some of the feedback that we got from F and F that night was looking more along the lines like, what if somebody violates the policy and abuses the card? We had some discussion last week, Wednesday, at the regular board meeting, and then it was decided that it would come back to policy for review.
Right.
I worked with Darren Clark over the course of this past week. He did some updates to the policy. So you have an updated policy in front of you. It's in the white piece of paper, procurement card program. In capturing the conversations at both F and F and the regular board, he added all that is there redlined.
Yep.
Which talks more about if the policy is violated. And, so we brought that to you tonight to take a look at and provide some comment to.
This may be, and I'll just jump in here, this may be all we need, although I would think that because of what we read from F and F and how they passed it, we should definitely cross-reference that. Because let's say somebody's looking up procurement card, that is so much more detailed even than this.
Yeah, and the guidelines, so there is a policy manual, there's a manual that's associated with this, or not a policy
Right,
manual, I'm sorry,
right.
guidelines. And they're not board guidelines, they're more of a management of the program guidelines.
Okay, I was
Sure.
gonna
So
ask
that if we have a P card program in the district, but at some time need to go with a different vendor, say somebody provides us a different rate.
Sure.
If the guidelines, that manual is listed in here, we're coming back to committee to update it because of the cross-reference. If this were to get too detailed, the administrative guidelines associated, that manual was about 20 pages long, which would then have been the associated administrative guidelines for this. So what we were looking more along the lines of is having the policy, which references the handbook, and then that would give administration the latitude to make the changes to the handbook that could come on an annual basis based off of interest rates, based off of better vendors. So that was some of the thinking that went into that.
So you want to put a cross-reference to the student handbook in here?
No, it's not the student handbook, it's the P card manual. So if you look in the policy, there's the procurement card program manual. That is what captures the
That's-
details of this program. The
Okay.
policy then does reference that. It just doesn't cross-reference it on the bottom, because the cross-reference then would require us to come back to committee
Okay.
to revise the policy.
That might suffice too, but I guess my question is, I thought that description, which was only about 2 pages, from F and F was just really good. So I thought we could cross-reference that too.
Okay.
I mean, it's just a thought. Because that's not X pages that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Ms. Brezink?
Oh, okay. There is a procurement card program manual. Have we seen that? Or
That
was-
went to F and F. It was presented at F and F last week, and I believe a copy of it was in the board packet from last week.
Yes, it was.
Just the F and F minutes with it in.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
that was, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe that'll,
And then, do you know specifically which Board of Education purchasing policies apply? Do you know the numbers?
I don't have the numbers right now.
Okay.
We'd have to dig in and cross-reference the
Okay.
numbers to the purchasing
But it would show
policies.
up under purchasing.
Correct.
Okay, that's easy enough to reference.
okay. Now, question here, and Lynn and Joe, since we, as a committee, passed this in
Yep.
November, then brought it forward to the board, and we were gonna ask for a waiver, which we didn't need to do, because, okay. So we'll bring it back in January, but we don't need to repass this, do we? Or with the new language, maybe we do.
I would just, yeah.
Probably wouldn't hurt,
I would encourage that it be
Yeah.
forwarded to
Okay.
the board with its updated language.
with the updated language. Okay,
And the underline does address the concerns from FNF and then the regular board conversation from last week.
okay. Other discussion, questions?
I'm just glad that that was inserted, because I've been going around my neighborhood, and I did get a question from somebody about it, and said, well, tell me about the use of this card. Does that mean every employee's gonna have a card? And I said, oh, no. This is just for
And the board.
administration, not
Right.
even us, no, of course not. But just for administration, and there's policy connected with it and rules connected with it. It isn't just go out and start
Right.
buying,
Correct.
so.
And
yeah.
Darren's explanation of it at FNF was more of a slow, gradual release into the system,
Yeah.
where it would start with certain departments. For instance, my department orders from several vendors very frequently. And the current model is, you place the order, you get a purchase order number, it goes through our internal system. The P card will help expedite that. Another benefit of it is if you use your own credit card, you get your miles or you get your points. Well, the district will now get the points associated with the purchases. So we'll be able to capture that in a financial manner, which will benefit us. There'll be a little bit of a return on our purchases.
Okay, yeah.
I think too, it will expedite at the building level. If you need something quickly, we used to always have to do a purchase order, and then would have to go through central office to be signed, and then the business office would send it in. It would take, sometimes 2 weeks to get something that you needed yesterday. So this is gonna expedite, securing materials that you need quickly.
And we're all still required to operate within what we proposed as our budget. So what is the approved budget for your department? This
Absolutely.
isn't like extend beyond it and try
No,
to pay it
no,
off.
no.
If you've got $5,000 set aside for general supplies, this card requires that you operate within that. And so you're still operating within your budget. It's just a more expedited approach to getting materials, supplies.
Sure.
So then, is that still the 370 account or a 411 account? Which one is it?
It starts out site by site, so
Right,
each one of
and
our
then it
schools has a number, and then it just depends on how it gets coded, what the purpose of
Okay.
the purchase
Because
is.
I understand what you're saying, I think the 370 might have been a supply account, and we had to stay within, we could transfer within the budget itself, but you can't go over your budget.
And as was discussed at FNF and the regular board, there are the controls and the measures within the district through
Right.
our auditors that where all of this stuff is gonna get caught and captured and filtered. So we have our checks and balances in place. This is just a more efficient approach to purchasing what it is we need.
And I think, to this point that you're
Yeah.
making, when we come back at the January board meeting, we can emphasize again the safeguard and sort of the watchdog,
Yep.
things that are in place, how that functions, yeah.
Central office then will really not be able to say yes or no to a site purchase, correct?
It depends, currently, there's not a yes or no for classroom supplies. There's not a yes or no for, think of something that you would need. There are certain departments that purchase certain things, so technology goes through Steve. The iPad
Right.
purchases are through Steve. Bigger things, not so much your non-capital, but your capital purchases, all of that goes through.
Okay.
Goes through district and goes through an approval. So none of that changes how we've operated. It's just, it's the same procedure.
It just calls to mind a silly situation that occurred many years ago. We ordered some books about, for reading. And the CNI director did not want us to purchase those books. So she said no, so we had to buy it out of our own money. But that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
So in other words, that's what I'm referring to. What if as a principal, I wanted to buy something and the district wouldn't necessarily, approve, but I guess there has to be a trust,
And again,
right?
going back to the policy, if there's if there's an established practice for purchasing textbooks, purchasing classroom materials, that is listed in this policy, and so we must adhere to what has already been established. So if there's a check and a balance, for instance, with CNI for a curricular area, if classroom books need to go through Bob's office at the elementary level or Jody's office at the secondary
Right.
level for final approval, those things are still in
Right,
place.
right.
Okay,
This is, again, it just gets down to the efficiency of being able to
think
make
so.
the order, but then also the return on investment. You know, just getting a little bit of cash back for our purchases.
I remember what it was. We wanted to buy a whole language book,
oh, boy.
just to become acquainted with, but our district wasn't doing whole language, so we had to buy it ourselves.
Oh, boy.
No reading whole, about whole language.
Ms. Ranichek?
Thank you. Do you know, Joe, is it 1% back as far as what they get?
There was a graduated breakdown in the board packet last week in the F&F materials that were included. And I don't want to speak with 100%, I'm not speaking with 100% accuracy, but 1.6 comes to mind as a
It's
return.
1 point something.
But we would have to, you know, go back to the F&F packet for the exact number.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for the questions and discussion, and Joe, thank you. We need a motion then to bring this forward in its amended form to the January board meeting.
All right, Madam Chairman, I'll move to accept the potential new policy 3310 as presented.
Okay,
Second?
all right, very good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that will be January 13th. Anyway, it'll be January.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Okay, we have another action item, which is in front of you, revision to policy 5113.1, the open enrollment and the guidelines for open enrollment, which has to do with this $12,000 stipend. Do you want to take us through that?
Correct. Recently, Wisconsin Act 55 has changed how open enrollment works in the state of Wisconsin. There have been a number of changes. Most of them are minor. The biggest one comes into special education, cost estimates, the timeline that's associated with it, and then what you see there is a $12,000 transfer rate for students with disabilities.
Right.
So what used to be the process, Lynn and I would get a request from another district for a family from outside of our district to come into the district. We would request a copy of the child's IEP. We would review the child's IEP and determine what additional costs were associated with educating that student. So for instance, it might be the addition of a one-on-one paraprofessional. It could have been a certain assistive technology. It could have been transportation. And we would do a cost estimate for the sending district. So for example, a student coming to us from New Berlin, their IEP would be sent to us. We would do the cost estimate. We would send that cost estimate back to New Berlin, and then New Berlin would be able to decide yes or no. Is it high cost? Is it an undue financial burden? And you see that undue financial burden in the strike-through areas in the policy. What Act 55 did is said, we're not going to ask you guys to do, the districts anymore, to do cost estimates. It's going to be a $12,000 transfer rate. The old open enrollment transfer rate, I think, was just shy of $7,000. So this, for a student with a disability, is now $12,000. So the same student coming from New Berlin would apply. We would not have to do the cost estimate. We would get a copy of the IEP, and then there wouldn't be this denial based off of undue financial burden. So the policy that you have in front of you reflects the changes in law. It doesn't reflect, outside of the cost estimate, it doesn't reflect our policy or how we've operated in the past, but that cost estimate piece is the piece that
The
changes
piece
now
that
with the law.
changes. Okay. Ms. Persing?
What if let's say it's it is a special ed student, and there's some needs for equipment that perhaps we don't have, and the equipment is more than $12,000. Do we pay for that, or does their district pay for
Correct.
that?
So we are currently in the process of looking at what our seat allocation would be in special education for the 2016-17 school year. So
Okay.
we're looking at where we're currently at with enrollment,
Okay.
how we've trended with enrollment, so on and so forth. If we say that we do not have room in special ed, that will come to you in the January board meeting for the board to vote on seat space. As has happened in years past. Last year, we said we didn't have any space. If we were to say in fifth grade, we have seats, and we were to allocate seats, say 5 seats in sixth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, and we got requests to come in for students with disabilities, it does not matter what is in that IEP, we accept that student, and if it's a kid who has limited additional need, then we would get the 12,000. If the student has more significant needs and may cost $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, we
yes.
still get the 12,000. So it would be on our dime then
It would
to
be on our,
provide
okay,
those services.
out of your budget?
Correct.
Okay,
Okay.
The district, I mean, it all comes
Right,
out of,
right.
it comes out of our money.
right.
Yep.
So if we may I go on? If we turn down a request, because, you know, we have some special programs that some districts don't have, then what? Where does that child go? They just have to keep looking to find a district to take that child?
They always have access to their resident district for services. And while we do have, you know, some programs that are unique to us, for instance, the DHH program at Lowell
right.
and Butler, all districts are required to provide services to students who have DHH needs.
Okay.
We have a program that does that. Other districts provide those services in a different format.
May I ask one more
Yes.
question? What about the vision program? Because that was one of a kind in the county, and we'd bus kids from all over the place.
We don't have a vision program. We provide services to students who have visual
Yes,
impairments.
I'm sure you do.
But we don't have
A
we do
classroom
not
like
have
you, so.
a like program to what was here many years ago. It's
Mm.
really taken care of on a need-by-need basis. The DHH program still is in existence as it's been for about 25 years.
Why? Because we have students that in need of that program?
We have a lot of students in
Okay.
need of the DHH program. The
But not
vision
necess-
program has not
Has not.
maintained an enrollment. So we do provide services. We have people come in and work with kids who have vision needs, orientation, mobility, whatever the student needs, we'll provide, but we don't do so under the guise of a program any longer,
Do they learn Braille like they used to? Or?
if that's what is appropriate.
Interesting.
Other questions? Yes.
Thank you. So if, let's say we have 5 seats, and then the first 5, is it like we would look at the first 5, or depending on what that cost would be, or do we get to actually analyze each one and say, well, this one's covered, this one isn't?
So we do a seat allocation. We accept open enrollment. So the process would be, the open enrollment window comes, we get our applications come in from usually it's from our surrounding districts. eAchieve is a little bit different because it's virtual, so we'll get kids from all corners of the state there. We then will go through, and if the student is a student with a disability, those kids then, at least this past year, the process was to put those students on a waiting list. And then as we got closer to the school year, determine if we had space at any grades. If we were to say we've got 5 seats open at a grade level, and we don't specify what we have space for, so we're just taking 5 students who have special education needs, it's really based off of a randomization process. It's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we have 10 behind them, it numbers down. But we're required to offer that seat to the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. And then if they reject that seat, then we can move somebody up. But it's a random process for all students. The waiting list is randomized. The way the kids come into the system is randomized, but you don't get to tease out who is next on the list.
I had 2 questions. On page 3, and I think these aren't changes, but I was just curious. A student can select a specific course. Am I looking at the right paragraph? I think so. And then transportation. There were 2 questions I had. One, it said,
Could you help me
where
with
am
the
I
line
looking?
you're looking at, please?
well, I'll go first to 38, 39, and so
Okay.
forth. The parents are responsible for transportation.
Correct.
Okay, so that hasn't changed. But then where was I seeing this? Where they could just do one course?
Correct. Students can open enroll
Yeah.
to a course
I saw
in a
that.
district.
Yeah.
And that's possible.
Oh, yeah, it
It's
is.
not-
It's 31.
It's not all that common
Okay,
for under brick and mortar. It
okay.
is more common for kids to take that option for eAchieve.
EAG, okay.
It's not that they don't do it in our brick and mortar environment, but
But
it's
it's
just
not
not
so
as
common.
common because the course that somebody might want could be 5th hour at one of our high schools.
Got it.
So you've got to leave your current school or your current situation, come there.
Okay,
so.
okay, Ms. Brzezinski, you had another question?
Yes, do we use the words special education and cross-categorical interchangeably? Does it, okay, then explain the difference.
Cross-categorical is a category within special education. Special education is it's the service model.
It's the,
It's
the umbrella.
it's everything. It's
Okay.
special education services, related services. It would be everything that's captured in
Okay.
a IEP. Cross-categorical it's more of a service delivery model, where if I was a high school teacher, in years past, and I can't speak necessarily to Waukesha on this, but I believe it was the case, I was an LD teacher. I taught students with learning
Yes,
disabilities.
we had all those
Or I
programs.
taught students with emotional behavioral disabilities.
right.
Now, a special education teacher who has a cross-categorical license, and that's where it comes down to. It was the 801 special ed license. Those teachers may work with a student who has a learning disability and an emotional behavioral disability and another health impairment. So that's where you get a little bit more of the
Okay.
cross-categorical.
So those teachers that didn't have, cross-categorical certification, it would be LD, ED, et cetera, were they grandfathered, or did they have to go back to school to get?
Really where the cross-cat helps us is in evaluation. So if you have a cross-categorical license,
Yeah.
you can be on the evaluation team and conduct an evaluation, your component, for any
Okay.
student.
Okay,
If you have an LD certification,
Yeah.
then you're limited in who you can evaluate. You could be the evaluatee of,
evaluation,
the
okay.
evaluator of a student for a learning disability. And that's why districts preferred the cross-categorical
Oh.
piece, because you didn't have a caseload of kids and then suddenly have to call on somebody else to be part of the
Sure,
evaluation of the
sure.
reevaluation team.
But-
The-
but then someone with just that LD certification can service LD kids and other,
Correct. Any special ed teacher can teach any student.
Anything, okay.
However, it boils down to the evaluation
Okay.
piece.
thank you.
I had just two more questions, and
Sure.
it kind of dovetails off of what Barb had asked. On page 4, I think it's about line 14, 15, you spoke a little bit about this, but now that we're taking this out, it says we're taking out this phrase, "the district might deny," right, based on cost.
Yep.
Okay, so that takes away the right for us to deny based on cost?
Correct. We're
Okay.
no longer in a position where we can take an IEP, look at the IEP, audit the IEP for how much it's gonna cost us,
Right.
and then send that back to the district with a cost estimate. It's either student is in or student is not in.
Okay.
And then here's the money that is associated with it.
And then under the guideline, I think related to that is page 2, line 15. Again, the district received a copy of individualized, the IEP, and we used to have to provide an estimate of cost, but now we no longer have to do that.
Correct. We get the IEP, but there's no cost estimate associated.
Okay. All right, thank you. Other questions? Yes,
Sorry.
Ms. Brzee.
On page 4,
Excuse me.
line 32, could you explain that I'm not really sure about that transportation situation?
Sure, if a student, under two circumstances, the first would be if a student is a student who has a disability and has transportation written into their IEP,
Okay.
and the school district of Waukesha accepts that,
Yes?
we are then required to provide transportation to get that student to school,
Even if it's in a different district?
but if it's a different district.
Okay.
That is part of the acceptance of the IEP. The other situation would be the McKinney-Vento Homeless Children's Act.
Yeah.
And that then would come into
Okay.
a legal obligation to provide transportation.
Okay. I just wasn't sure what that meant.
Very good, and thank you for your response. You know all about this, and we're
Oh,
still
doesn't he?
learning.
Oh,
I mean, I read this through twice, and I thought, well, hope Joe knows the answers to these things. Thank you, Joe. All right, so we need a motion to.
Karen has a question.
Oh, you have another question? I'm sorry, didn't I see your hand?
Thank you. Do you have an estimate of the cost this is going to cost the district?
You know,
Or
it
because
really
it's
comes
so
down into
random?
this number of seats that are allocated at next month's board meeting. So when we do our enrollment, where we're at and what we project to be our enrollment in special ed, when we compare that to the number of teachers and therapists that we have in the district, and we take a look at what their caseloads are, that is gonna then generate our recommendation, my recommendation to you as a board for the number of seats. If using last year as an example, going into this school year, we didn't allocate any seats. And we did that based off of the number of teachers and therapists that we have in the district, the number of currently enrolled students that we have in special education, and where those kids are at. So we did not make a recommendation to have any seats open in special ed. That then would have meant that it wouldn't have cost, there'd have been no cost associated with it. No gain, no loss. If we sit down this year and take a look and find that there is space at certain grade levels or in certain programs and come to the board with those seats, then it really depends on, which students would apply to open enrollment in the district. Some students, there would be no associated costs with it. Other students, there could be more substantial costs.
2 more questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you. 2 questions. First, where would that money come from if we had any inquiries? And then how many last year were inquiring if we had any open seats? Like, how many did we turn away? Or did we, because we said there were 0, none applied? Or
We had a lot of
came
students
first?
apply that ended up on a waiting list, and that varied by grade. So it'd be very hard for me to give you an exact number, but a couple hundred were on waiting lists, K-12 in our system, for our brick and mortar sites. We still had a few on waiting lists, even for our eAchieve Academy. Where the money comes from, we have our District Fund 27 budget, our Fund 27 account, which is our special projects account that services our students with disabilities in the district. If there were excess costs, that would be where it would come in. Again, if we had seats though, and we allocated those seats, we might have a student come into us that was only costing us, say, $8,000 to educate, and we're getting $12,000 for their seat. We might have a kid that costs us $40,000 to educate, and we're getting $12,000. So how that comes out at the end of the year transfer, it'd be very difficult for me to try to accurately estimate that at this time. What will help us determine that is, again, how many kids do we have currently enrolled? What is our teaching FTE? How many speech and language therapists do we have in the district? What would their caseloads look like going into next school year? And then that would help us determine, or help me determine what my recommendation is to you for seats at next month's board meeting.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, then I'll get to Ms. Persing. So somewhat picking up off what she said, I guess I'm wondering, and you know the background of it, if the state is upping this from 7 to 12, which is a considerable hike, because they felt that some students weren't well served.
I think that there was a number of reasons. One, the
Okay.
cost estimate associated with this was a time-consuming and labor-intensive
Sure,
process.
sure.
So by making it a flat rate of transfer, I think that there might have been some intention to try to reduce the office load of doing these cost estimates. There's obviously an appeal process noted that people can
Okay.
appeal to the state. I don't have any hard, fast information as to how,
Sure.
what the state used to determine was an undue financial burden. I think that there was some subjectivity to undue financial burden.
Sure.
A district that may have a lot of money may have had more high-cost students go out than a district that didn't have a lot of money, because that financial impact, $80,000 student, that financial impact may have been applied differently to other
Okay.
district by district. So I think that some of that was the reason why they said, we're
Sure.
gonna look at this as a flat $12,000 transfer, and
Okay.
districts, you guys can make a decision based off of space and other things if you
Makes
can do it.
sense, yeah. Ms. Persing?
Just one last question, Joe. We do get state and federal monies for our programs, don't we?
Sure, special ed is funded through federal grant, local dollars, local taxpayers' dollars,
Right.
state dollars, and federal dollars
Okay, that's
to
what I thought.
make up the money.
All right.
And there are a lot of rules that are associated with the Fund 27 budget that go beyond what is just the district dollars.
Okay.
So reporting grants, so on and so forth.
Well, you certainly know your stuff.
You sure do, thank heavens.
Been living it for a while, so.
Yep,
I know,
so
yeah, I know
we-
it.
We count on that. All right, so we need a motion to bring this forward to our January meeting, policy 5113.1 and 5113.1G, the guidelines.
If I may add just to this, that this would be a recommendation, a change, that we would ask that the second reading would be waived.
Okay.
Because it's gonna have to be something that applies to our decision-making in January.
Okay, all right, and I'm sure you'll put that in the narrative, so. Okay, is there a motion to that effect, or,
Does what Joe said have to be in the motion to waive that, or no?
no, that's a separate
Okay.
motion.
All right, I will I will move to accept the revisions to policy 5113.1, open enrollment program, and 5113.1G, guidelines for open enrollment program as presented.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, 3-0, we'll bring that forward, and we'll also request the waiver.
Thank you.
Okay, the last action item is the guidelines for technology acceptable use. We've seen these before, but in front of us here, we have revision to policy 6150G, the guidelines, so.
So a number of years ago, the district had adopted a bring your own device policy. And while the planning and the intention around that was good, there was some issue, concern, problems that arose by having students, with free access to their cell phones in the classrooms. I believe it was 2 years ago, a policy revision came to policy committee. And based off of that, there was a recommendation to seek some guidance from principals who had to deal with this and apply it on a day-to-day basis. That guidance was Lynn did some checking, and the principals were in favor of putting a little bit more control around cell phones specifically in the schools. So if you look at line 52
Yep.
on 6150G, so the first page of the policy, and it carries over into the first 3 lines on the second page, that tightens up the cell phone use in the schools. Teachers can still say you may bring your phones to class to do X, Y, and Z with them, but random use of cell phones in hallways, study halls is now prohibited in the district. And again, this captures practice because our principals have been working to enforce this for a while. This supports their efforts.
Okay, or backpacks, so we're still a little looser than I'd like to see us, but, because I was on policy committee when this first came up, and I remember thinking, oh my God, that's gonna be a nightmare. And then I was off policy committee for a couple of years. And so, seeing it back, I'm glad, because I think we do have to tighten this up. I guess personally, I think lockers would be the ideal, but backpacks is,
Backpacks
Well, to see.
allows the student to still have it on their person and, in
Yep.
essence, under their care. Whereas in the locker, if the student is not attending to their locker, that locker then, the trip might not necessarily be there. This allows the kid to keep their cell phone secure, but it does say it's not out, it's not present, it's not being used, not disrupting the hallway, the classroom.
well, ideally, but come on.
Ideally, I understand, ideally.
Give me a break. And also in classrooms, we don't mandate that it be turned off in their backpack. So, I mean, we're still a little looser than I wish we were,
Would-
but, so the teacher as cell phone policeman remains kind of here. But,
The teachers there, practice has been for the last number of years that no cell phones are out. The policy is to try to catch the practice at this
yeah,
time.
well, we may come back to this in another year and tighten it even further, I think, but, at least it's a step. Questions or comments on this? Yeah, Ms. Rennicek?
Thank you. So, they can use it in between classes, or no?
Not to be out in the hallway, being used in the hallway.
Okay, because it says,
Yeah.
the study halls, but I didn't see
It doesn't say you can't use it in the
hallways.
hallway between classes.
If I'll get a text sometimes from my daughter, and it'll say, play practice is canceled, I need a ride home or something. So that would have to be before or after school, because it's absolutely supposed to be turned off all during the day. It's not, at no time can they be seen with it at all, right?
Correct. That is the understanding, and I think that's been the expectation, but when you're looking at the student body in a school, when you're looking at the number of administrators or the number of teachers, or you're looking at the freedom in the hallway, kids aren't supposed to be doing it. Are they doing it?
Oh, yeah.
Probably. It's just a matter of if you're caught with it, you shouldn't have it out, is really what it comes down to.
For the bath.
Okay, because it doesn't say in the hallways, so
No, it
I
doesn't.
don't know if we should add that, or what your thoughts are.
I think that the intention of this was to give teachers and administrators support about what happens in the classroom and in the study hall environment. And so I think that that was the intention of the policy. The practice behind the hallway, that's an environment that can be reasonably policed by teachers and administrators. I don't think that the hallway can be policed to that same level. You don't have 30 kids sitting in front of you underneath your eyes. You've got 100 kids, 200 kids walking up and down the hallway. So I think that this is really to help teachers and administrators control what's going on in our classrooms.
Well, it does say, cell phones must remain in lockers or backpacks, but not be present in any manner. So would you think that that might cover hallways?
Present means, at least
Out
for me, I would
in my
think
hand.
visible,
Visible?
because they can still do anything, that under the table, so I would just,
I don't know.
I think that the policy tries to recognize what our reality currently is. Our reality is that I would say with relative certainty that 90% of our middle and high school kids or better have a personal device on them during the day, a cell phone. A number of our elementary school students do as well. I think that this is to help us with the enforcement of what goes on, again, in what we would consider to be the controlled environments, the classroom, the study hall, the resource centers that are there and present in the school.
And the principals looked at this language.
The principals have reviewed this language. Lynn reviewed their comments about 2 weeks ago, and they were in supportive of this language.
Okay.
Yes.
thank you. Under 23 consequences, it says it may result in loss of privileges. Do principals have the authority to take the cell phone? Let's say the child is ready to go home and they've lost it. Are they supposed to give it back at that time? How does that work?
I've seen, and again, this is based off of a number of years of experience, I've seen systems where the parent has to be the one to come in and get it. I've seen systems where on the first offense, it's released back to the students. I couldn't speak specifically, thinking of our 8 secondary sites. Do they make the parent come in and get it back? Do they have the student come and get it at the end of the day? Do they hold it for a day until a conference is had, or at least a phone call with the parent? I think all of those things are in place. It just depends on the first, is this the first offense? Is this the 10th offense? Have we had to revisit this over and over and over again?
Okay. We'll see.
So this is the recommended language. Again, I think it captures almost 2 years of conversation on this particular topic.
I have, over 18-year-olds. I mean, I have university students, and we're strict.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Because otherwise,
Of course.
it's bedlam. And if the phone rings, I say, well, obviously that's a call for me, so bring it down so I can answer it.
Oh, good. for
Although
you.
they mostly text now, so it doesn't ring.
It's a lot of text messaging.
Yeah, but if they have it out in their text messaging, I just stop the class and they have to put it down and put it away.
I've just gotten off of a weekend of classes, doctoral level classes where you've got, it's all working adults. So there are times where on a Friday night, for instance, I'm still on the phone for district related stuff and have to step out of class, people with their children. It's really whatever to the professor's discretion as to what they'll allow.
Sure.
I think the general request has been they'll make sure that it's on vibrate so that you're not
Right.
disrupting the entire
Right, yeah.
program.
Okay, so we'll see how this works and hope for the best. We do need a motion to bring this forward as well in January, right?
Okay, Madam Chairman, I move to accept the revisions to policy number 6150G, guidelines for technology acceptable use as presented.
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 3-0. We'll bring it forward.
And since it's a guideline, it only requires one
One
reading,
reading.
according to our policy
Right,
on
so, January.
policies. So that will also go for approval in January.
okay, good. So we'll
Thanks.
be busy. We have no information items. Any discussion items that you have, Joe, or anybody?
None at this time. Again, we continue to keep an eye on policies, recommendations from
Sure.
legal counsel. We get email updates. We get email updates from the School Board Association on what's there. Really, it would be nice if there was a way for somebody to be, keeping an eye on that almost for us, generating it, making a recommendation to us, and helping us be a little bit more efficient with it. But other than that, we don't have anything brewing right now.
What's the date of our January meeting?